Okay, good evening everybody, and welcome to the Audit and Governance Committee meeting this evening at 7 o'clock on the 17th of January 2022. Before I start fully, I have a message to read out to you. I would like to remind everyone present that in this meeting there will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by third parties. If you are seated in the lower public seating area, then it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, then you should move to the upper public gallery. Thank you. Once again, welcome committee members, officers, and anybody watching over the webcast. Right, thank you very much. First item 2, apologies for absence.
No apologies for absence received.
No apologies for absence. Item 3, declarations of interest. No?
Simon Heap's got his hand up, Chair.
That's just incompetence.
You okay, Councillor Heap? Okay, he's all right. Okay, the minutes of the last meeting, which was on the Monday the 17th of January, are there any comments? Pass? No. No. Okay, no comments, they're agreed. Matters arising. Any matters arising from the previous minutes? Sorry.
Can I update the committee, Chair, if I may, really? So at the last meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee, the committee considered the capital and treasury management strategies. I should point out that those, well, it was actually made clear on the night that those strategies were draft strategies based upon draft capital programme information that is still to go to Council at that point in time. So we made clear to the committee that there may be some minor changes from Cabinet and from Council in terms of approving the capital programme, which would need to feed through into the strategies themselves. And therefore the committee gave delegation to me to make any minor changes that were necessary in consultation with yourself. There were some minor changes, only small adjustments, and we did appraise you of those changes before it went to Council in February. So I just wanted to update the committee about that as well. Can I also just point out that there's been also a minor breach, or a breach, sorry, of some of our treasury management limits as well since the last committee. And that's really to do with the amount of money that we have invested at any given point in time. We needed to hold higher level of cash balances through a couple of reasons. One is that we needed to reimburse the government some business rate money that they gave associated with COVID. So we had to reimburse £9.7 million, and we had to hold that cash until we knew exactly when the government wanted that money. And we also had to draw some money from Public Works Loan Board on lend to Qualis as part of our approved loans to Qualis. And that was £16 million that we had to hold on at the same time. So with those two amounts of cash being held, we breached our Treasury Management investment limit between the end of February and the 1st of March. I can now say that those monies have been paid out, and so we're back within our limits. We did advise the chair of the committee, as we're required to do, but I just wanted to make the committee aware of that fact.
Thank you. Yes, you did advise me.
Chairman, you're muted.
No? Hello, can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Okay. Right, work programme. Any comments on the work programme?
Thank you, Chairman. I wondered whether we could have an update on the items towards the end of the work programme on 17th of March, so that should stay, regarding the accounts and audits and the annual audit letter and those sorts of things. I appreciate this is a difficult area for many councils at the moment, but an update would be appreciated.
Chair, if I may, yes, I would happily update the committee in terms of where we are in terms of the statement of accounts as it stands. Well, it's quite a long story, I'm afraid. As you'll know, we should have approved the accounts, or the auditors should have approved the accounts at the end of November, I think it was. And that was delayed because our auditors hadn't completed their work. And so we're still in the situation right now where our accounts haven't been completed and the auditors haven't been in to do the work. We raised it with this committee on a number of occasions that there are problems in the audit sector right now. We won't get an awful lot of joy in terms of our audit partner, really, in terms of getting a firm date for when the audit was likely to take place. So ultimately, we wrote to the public sector auditor appointment body, the body that organises the contracts for supply of local government audit, to say that we were frustrated and we wanted some action under the contract to try and get the auditor to perform in line with the in line with the contract requirements. There are, the chair of the PSAA met with myself and Mr. Hartgrove to discuss the current situation and our frustration. Ultimately, they went back to the partner for the audit firm who negotiated that block of contracts across the country. So the contract manager, if you like, with our auditor, to see what could be done. The chair fed back to us subsequently to that meeting, and we had a long conversation about the problems that are being experienced in the sector, really. Largely, it comes down to a shortage of qualified auditor staff, and that's the big issue, I think. And it's not just unique to our auditor. It's it's experienced by all of the big auditing firms who are supplying audits under the PSAA framework. So the situation isn't unique to us, and it's really down to a shortage of staff. Doesn't help us particularly that the government is aware, the professional body, SIPFA, is also aware. They're all trying to work to try and make the process easier, to try and take out some of the additional requirement as part of the audit process that takes a lot of auditing time to make the audit simpler. But PSAA chair himself said that it's not a quick fix. If we're honest, they're not going to. There's a lot of work going on to try and recruit extra staff into the sector. It doesn't happen overnight. The changes to the auditing framework don't happen overnight. So there are no quick fixes to the situation we find ourselves in, and indeed most councils find themselves in at this moment in time as well. We have seen some traction in terms of the date for audit. It's been pushed back for 21-22, so that from the 31st of March. It would have been the end of May. It's now gone back to the end of July, and hopefully we'll see an extension to the time for audit as well. Subsequent to our meeting with the PSAA chair, we were contacted by our auditor again in terms of made contact or re-established contact to discuss how we could get through the current impasse around audit. The last thing we want as a finance team is for the auditors to come on to site when we're supposed to be closing the accounts for 21-22, which starts, well, it's effectively started really. So if they came on site now, they would just slow down that process. So what's been agreed currently is that the auditors will come on site in July to audit the 2021 accounts, and then they'll do the 21-22 accounts back to back with that. So we're hopeful that we'll see audit opinions for 2021 and hopefully 21-22 towards the end of September, would be my current guess. It's not an ideal situation, not a situation of our making, and it's, as I say, it's a situation that's largely replicated across most of local government. Very few councils have got their accounts signed, and most are experiencing the same problems that we are. So that's useful in terms of an update. So.
Thank you, Andrew. So basically, we don't know exactly when this is going to be completed, and there's nothing we can do about it either. Awkward position for everybody, not just us. Okay, anything else, Tony? You're happy on that? Okay, the next item then is the...
Councillor Hadley, the Councillor Heap,
Oh.
wanting to ask a question.
Councillor Heap.
Thank you. Do we think going forward that the collective effort that was that gave us whoever it is at the moment, Deloitte, is the way forward, or should we go for a separate accounting firm in the future?
That was a good question, and one that we did discuss when we considered whether we want to be part of the PSAA procurement process leading to the next batch of contracts live from 1st of April 2024. So we had a conversation at length with the chair of PSAA, and they did their best to comfort us really in terms of that approach. One thing that they said is what they're looking to do is bring more audit firms into to bid for contracts really, so there are more firms in play than the current largely 3 or 4 big contractors, big firms actually bidding for contracts at the moment or delivering contracts at the moment. So what they want to get is more medium to large size firms in play on the hope that provides more capacity, more resilience, and more alternatives if one of the contracts fails to deliver as well. I think, as I say, the issue is replicated across all of the audit firms, so it's not a quick fix, and I still think that PSAA will probably be the right way forward. That said, there are probably more councils this time round who won't go through the PSAA route. Last time round it was 98% of all councils used PSAA. I expect there'll be a reduction on that this time round, but I still think the vast majority of councils will use PSAA to negotiate contracts. As I said, I mean, it has been useful in terms of being able to call upon them this time to take issue where our own conversation with our auditors wasn't producing any results. PSAA have been quite useful in that regard in terms of being able to provide additional leverage in terms of encouraging or persuading our auditors to perform in line with the contract requirement. So I still think it's the right way forward if you were asking me for an opinion.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Heap, you happy with the answer?
Oh, yeah, very happy. I think that probably the accounts are very well kept at the moment. I have every faith. So I imagine it's pretty much a rubber stamping exercise, but
Yep.
I appreciate the dilemma that we're all in.
Okay. Anybody else?
Thank you, Chairman. I assume we can't file the accounts without them being audited, correct?
Well, we put the draft accounts online anyway, and that's a requirement to publish our draft accounts, and the draft accounts subject to audit at that point in time. So they don't get filed with any central body other than central government, of course, who needs them to be consolidated as part of whole of government accounts. So the government produces a balance sheet for all of the public sector, and our data will go into that. Currently, they're just using our draft set of accounts, but as I say, there are more than one council holding up that completion of that process. In fact, probably the vast majority of councils at this point in time. So as I say, our draft accounts are online, available for any member of the public to look at, but they will get updated at some point, subject to audit, with the audited accounts as soon as they're available. So I think I would, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Anybody else will work?
I was just going to have a follow-up, actually. So is there a point where it becomes a problem if we're a year late, 2 years late, 10 years late? At what point does government say it's an issue?
Well, there are, we're still waiting for our 2021 accounts to be audited. There are neighbouring councils who are still waiting for their 18-19 accounts to be audited. So, I mean, it's not, we're not, you know, we're in the middle of the bunch, I suppose, at this point in time. And whilst it's not a great situation, the government is you know, frustrated by it, would probably like to see it, but the government recognises that the problems are not of the council's making. The government's actively working with the auditing sector to try and improve the situation. It does become a problem to an extent for us, because if there are any problems in terms of balances brought forward, and we did see this, you know, going back 2 years, then we're not identifying those, and we're building forward future budgets on numbers that we don't know are right. So we very much want to get it resolved for our own purposes, so that we know that when we strike a balance and set a budget, that we're doing it on the correct numbers. Last thing we want is retrospective change going back a couple of years, which means that suddenly we found ourselves in a position that's worse than we thought we were in. So that's why we want it done.
Anybody else have any other considerations for the work programme? Okay, so we've considered it. Next item, item 7, risk management, page 30 to 34. And we're going to consider and comment on the risk management report. So, gentlemen, who would like to start?
Can I just kick off and give a short introduction to the item, really? So it is a standing item, and members will have seen this before. It's presented to all Audit and Governance Committee meetings. If I'm honest, nothing significant has changed at the point this was prepared. It's done as the result of a review of the main risks that the council's facing by officers, and then put into this report and presented to you as committee members for your consideration and discussion, really. I think it's just a measure of how quickly things can change, really. So I think even since this was published, probably the wider Ukraine situation is having a bearing upon the economy now, and will continue to have such for probably weeks, months, even years potentially. So that wasn't envisaged at the point in time this was prepared. But you can see through media reports that obviously it is will have an impact upon the wider economy. It will impact upon prices primarily. There'll be impacts in terms of reduced supply, inflationary factors that are probably, whilst inflation was already singled out as probably one of the greater risks when the budget was prepared, that's probably an elevated risk now, and I expect that when we re-look at this risk matrix, when we next come to prepare the report for the next Audit and Governance Committee, that probably we'll see some of that financial resilience risk increasing from its current position, largely associated with global events at this point in time. But it does underline just how quickly things can change, and therefore the benefit in bringing this to each committee really for consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Do we have any comments at all? Councillor Heap?
Thank you. Yes, I take on board the idea of the Ukraine might have an effect, but we've not been food secure in this country since 1816, so it shouldn't really be that much of a factor. And just as a general point, and I know it's nothing that can be done by this particular council, but had we had a better energy policy from year 2000 onwards, 1990 onwards, we wouldn't be in this particular predicament.
Thank you, Councillor Heap. Anybody else here who's got any comments? So, I mean, presumably then we might see something regarding the economic situation appear in the risk register the next time round, depending what happens over the next week, days, months, whatever. We can't ignore it, so maybe it ought to be somewhere, but I know we've got something to talk about at the end of this meeting. So,
inherently, I think the risk is increasing in that space right now. So I expect that we will see something in the next iteration of this risk register.
Okay, thank you very much. If nobody else has got anything to say, to Councillor Vaz, you looking like you might have?
I thought I read somewhere that this drive to net zero is going to cost the council quite a lot of money, but it doesn't actually say how much. I was just intrigued to wonder how much it will cost the council, and in turn how much it's going to cost the ratepayers. I mean, I myself don't agree with all this net zero business, but I just wondered if you know.
Are you aware, Andrew?
Straight answer is no. I don't know what the cost of getting towards net zero or getting out to net zero will be at this moment in time. I'm sure work is continuing to try and quantify that.
Good question, Councillor Vaz.
Well, can I just interject at that point?
Well, yeah.
Had we gone for net zero in the year 2000, we now would not be in this problem. So let's not delay this problem. Let's get on with it. Go to net zero as quick as possible.
True. Thank you. Okay, let's move on then from this item, and we're now on to item 8, the internal audit process report, pages 35 to 50, and Sarah is going to lead on that.
Councillor Hadley, Chair, can I just remind members that the actual report is the supplementary agenda for this item. The report is a supplementary agenda item. The appendices are the main body of the report.
Everybody's got all the parts there, haven't they? I'm taking it. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give you a quick update on this report. So work is progressing well, but we're seeking approval to defer or cancel 4 audits from this year's audit plan. So the first one is debtors, and implementation of the new debtors system was slightly delayed during the year, and so it's been agreed with the service manager that we'll wait until the processes have embedded, and this audit is included in the audit plan for next year, which is later in the agenda. Second one is staff recruitment. So when we prepared this year's audit plan, which was about a year ago, this was a new module, but there have been no issues with this, and we consider this a low risk. The third one is town centre projects. So we've had discussions with economic development, and the projects are subject to a scrutiny, and so we have instead spent the days on providing assurances around the business grants that we've awarded, which were considered to be a higher risk. And the last one is contractor health and safety. So internal audit has been assisting with developing the council's health and safety framework. We're involved in the strategic health and safety group, and we have an assurance mapping exercise on next year's audit plan, which will highlight any gaps in that. We've issued 2 final reports since the committee had its last update in January, and both were given substantial assurance. There's only one recommendation following the safeguarding audit, and that was around member training, and this has been addressed. There were no recommendations from the housing benefits audit. And onto the recommendation tracker. So it's pleasing to see that the number of overdue recommendations has come down, and I think it's worth noting that there are no high priority recommendations there. The high priority that was there in January related to development of an IT disaster recovery plan, which has been completed and tested. And the 2 health and safety recommendations are going to be reviewed as part of the assurance mapping work, which I just referred to, on next year's plan. And if necessary, those recommendations will be revised and or reinstated. And paragraph 8 describes some of the other work of internal audit. I'd just like to pull out one, and that's the decision-making accountability. So this is a big piece of work where we're looking at the levels of authority of staff in the new structure. So it involves working with colleagues in finance and procurement to make sure it's consistent with financial regulations and the procurement rules, with colleagues in legal to ensure it agrees with the Constitution, and with business support to make sure that the delegated authorities actually work efficiently in practice. And finally, the report gives an update on the progress against the actions in the annual governance statement. So I think I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Just an aside, really. One of the items is Section 106 agreements, which are just scoping at the moment. And I've had some experience of these in the past. And I mean, there's three aspects to them. One, actually making sure they're entered into when they should be. Secondly is drawing up a legal agreement. And third one, the payment come in, which is relevant to the legal agreement. My experience is that last step sometimes doesn't happen. So if I was to concentrate energies, it would be around the payments of the legal debts incurred when the legal agreement has been made.
Yes, that's certainly one of the objectives in the audit, so that will be one part of it. We'll look at the recording, the monitoring, and how they recognise the trigger points and things like that, and also the collection of the income.
Okay, Tony, happy with that? Great, okay. Councillor Owen.
Thank you. The overpayment of housing benefits for 171,000 that's going to be written off at the bottom of page 4. How do we end up in a position where it gets written off? Is this because they've obviously left the area, I assume, so we can't then deduct it from them? How does it work that we write it off they must have left, I assume?
So there could be different reasons why they can't be collected. Some people will be deceased, some people will have moved away and not traceable, and some are just uneconomic to recover.
For the ones where it's uneconomic to recover, should we not just stop paying them, or is that just unethical? How does that work?
So where possible, we recover any overpayments through ongoing benefit, and these will relate to cases where that they're no longer receiving benefit, so we're not able to do that.
Well, thank you. Anybody else anywhere? Any questions? It looks like no. Okay, in which case, we've considered this. And we can move on to the next item, which is?
Excuse me, Chair, you need to approve the deferral for audits, please.
Okay. I've lost myself on this. Yes, approve the deferral of the 4 audits. Thank you. Okay, the next one after that is the Internal Audit Strategy and Plan 2022-23, pages 51 to 80. Again, to consider and comment on the Internal Audit Strategy. Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. I'll run through the strategy and just give you the highlights of the actual audit plan, which is Appendix A. As a reminder to the Audit Committee, this is a really important document because I need to ensure that I do enough audit work across the Council in order to give my annual opinion on the internal control, governance and risk management frameworks within the Council. And that's what you should be looking for when you're seeking the approval. So moving through the document, just a reminder on the key deliverables. This is item 8. So the strategy in the Internal Audit Service is to make sure that we deliver the plan, that we look at there's an integrated approach to assurance, so you're not getting your assurance just from us, but from other sources such as risk management or from health and safety or even from the external auditors. Making sure that we get management commitment to our recommendations. No good making recommendations if they're not implemented. And I really welcome the help that you give us with the tracker and scrutinising that. We're continuing developing our approach. We make sure that we're not standing still. So this year we're introducing data analytics. I want to upskill the team to make sure that we can make much better use of the data that's available. And also making sure that we give that business insights, making sure the recommendations are pragmatic and can work for the Council, and sharing the good practice that we see elsewhere. So moving on to item 14 there. So at the moment we have a standard set of opinions that we give of our reports, and CIPFA have provided guidance for across the sector to make sure that these align. This means that you can do better benchmarking with other councils and the opinions that they give. So at the moment we have 4 ratings: substantial, moderate, limited and no, and you'll see in the table there what the definitions is that we're using at the moment. And then the last column is the definitions that CIPFA are recommending. So they're not vastly different. There's a few more words in there, but they're saying the same sort of thing. So we're recommending that we move over to this model, and the basic change will be a bit more wording around the criteria. The moderate will be dropped and we'll use reasonable instead. But we still would like to keep the wording that any high priority recommendations will prevent a reasonable or moderate assurance rating being given, because we don't give out high recommendations unless they really have to be. And this will be applied for next year's audit plan and onwards. As a reminder, we went under an external quality assessment, which is required every 5 years by an independent assessor, and we're fully compliant with the standards which we have to adhere to. And again, I'd just say I'm very proud of the team of achieving that and keeping that. We have a set of indicators under 18, which we report on at year end, and they're the same ones that we used last time. So I did some training earlier with for the Audit Committee and talked about how we develop the audit plan. So it's a juggling act, working out what the key risks are to the Council, making sure that we give assurances over that. We look at the external and the internal environment, and we also look to see what audits are taking place across other councils. Moving on then, so the internal audit plan under section 24, so there's the overall sort of framework, there's the governance, performance indicators, fraud, those overarching themes. It's then split into strategic themes where we look at procurement, health and safety, IT audits and things like that, and then we delve down into the service area. So the priorities for the next year are similar to the previous years, where we're going to look at information governance, risk management, fraud, value for money, continue supporting the committee, continue with key financial control audits, as well as looking at governance frameworks, and as I said earlier, introducing better use of data analytics. So the number of audit days remains roughly the same as in previous years, around the 465 days. So I'm just going to talk about Appendix A. So this is a 3-year plan. Year 1 is fairly fixed, but there is flexibility to change it if something comes up or there's an emerging issue that we need to factor in, or we need to do in an investigation like that. So years 2 and 3 are more sort of aspirational, but gives us an idea of what we might be doing in future years. A tick in a box means I'm not quite sure at this stage what we're going to be doing in that area, but we will be doing something. So some of the highlights of the audits we're going to be looking at, so we can continue with our audits of Qualis, looking at Qualis Commercial, the property development arm. We're going to look at declarations of interest. We know there's the process isn't working as expected, so there's no point doing an audit. We'll just work with officers and get that fixed. We'll also look at performance indicators, especially where they're underperforming, and make sure there is adequate action to make sure that they're being addressed. So some audits will feature in the audit plans several times. So a good example of that is commercial rents. So that features under the income stream and also under the HRA. So it's not 2 different audits, it's the same audit that's hitting 2 different themes. As Sue mentioned, the key financial control debtors is a new system, and we'll be looking at that. Cyber security is an area that we're going to be looking at, and I'm considering whether that should be an annual or biannual audit with the reliance that we place on IT, and especially with things that are happening in the external environment. Climate Emergency Action Plan is a new audit, and we'll also be looking at the local plan and community grants. So my opinion, there's a widespread of audits. It gives me a good insight to what's happening within the council, and I can give my year-end opinion. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Again, questions, please. Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a few areas of concern, and I'm sure they'll come as no surprise to the officer. One of which is fraud and conflict of interest, because we have a clear conflict of interest between members of Qualis, EFDC, landowners within the district. Evidence has been presented to the officer, and so far I have not received a satisfactory answer. So to go into detail is probably not appropriate at this point, but there is a big concern about it. And my other concern is that we are supporting unfairly businesses in the district. So there's going to be a cafe in the Civic building, if that's what it's called this week. And there's the MOT station in whatever it is. So these things do not depend on custom to live, to exist. And that is a clear unfair advantage that we're giving them as opposed to other people within the district. So I don't think that should really happen.
Thank you, Councillor Heap. Anybody going to take that? Okay, Councillor Owen.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I just echo that on Qualis. I think it's probably the biggest risk the council have, if I'm honest. I am a fan of what Qualis is doing, but I think we just need to be whiter than white. I'm particularly concerned about when we transfer land between the council and Qualis and the value we give it. And I'd love to see some audit work around that in the future, to be honest.
Okay, can I ask if any audit work is going on that? The value of land?
Well, I can ask Sarah whether she needs to look at that as part of the audit programme. I mean, there was a recent report that went to Cabinet last week or the week before, proposing a transfer of land. I did write the report in terms of from an officer perspective and looking after the interests of the council. And I was satisfied that there was valuation information that supported the council's statutory duty under section 123 to get fair value for any land that is transferred. So I was content, but I can ask Sarah to look at that decision to make sure that she's equally satisfied by the approach adopted by the council. But as I say, that there's a statutory duty and a section 151 officer. I need to make sure that we comply with that as well. So hence the reason for me taking the shareholder role, if you like, at an officer level to make sure that the council is protected in terms of its financial transactions with Qualis. Councillor Heap alluded to some concerns that he has in relation to conflict of interests, and I know through conversations with Sarah Marsh that we did look at those, the concerns that he brought to our attention, and we found nothing to substantiate the concerns that he raised, so that there is no further working progress planned at this moment in time around that particular issue.
Councillor Heap, do you want to say anything else?
I'm not satisfied with that answer either, because there is clear evidence being presented and it is being ignored. And ignoring it is not the same as having a proper investigation. Now, if I need to go into specifics, I'll do it right now. I'm quite happy to. Quite happy to be sued if I'm wrong.
Andrew.
Do we want to go down that route?
Can I take a conversation? Can I have a conversation with Councillor Heap separately, ideally around that particular issue? So I'm more than happy to have a conversation as to why I was satisfied. But we'd probably be better to take that offline if we can.
Happy to do that.
I'll contact Councillor Heap.
Okay, so Councillor Heap, you'll talk with Andrew Small on that topic, on the details as opposed to what you just said, yeah? Okay.
Details and names, yes.
Yes? Anything you want to? Councillor Rowling.
Yeah, just to clarify my point, because I think Andrew Small was taking it that I was aiming it at him. I wasn't. I think my concerns are around more that we have certain execs who are on the council and on Qualis, and if Qualis performs, they're in line for certain bonuses potentially that they're not in line for at the council. Therefore, they're incentivised more. My concern, and hopefully it doesn't, lead down this road, but to undervalue land or however it's done to inflate the Qualis numbers so that they get a better bonus basically that they wouldn't be in line for at the council is my concern.
Thank you. None of the officers of the council that are on the Qualis board are incentivised or have any bonus. So the only member of potentially member of staff would be Sasha Jevons, who's managing director of Qualis, but she's no longer an employee of the council. So I don't think that risk exists, and I think all of the interests of the officers of the council who are on the Qualis board they're not incentivised in any way to benefit Qualis, and are acting in their role on the board as council representatives in the interest of the council.
Okay. Right, anybody else? Sorry?
Well, there is one more point.
Go on then.
Thank you. Your indulgence. I am a bit concerned that Qualis are now trying to support our debt obligations when there's no, clearly following a question by Councillor Owen at full council, there's no intention to ever pay it off. So we are reliant on Qualis to try and support our debt and paying the debt, which means they're going to start taking huge commissions from the work that would have been done by the council for no commission. And in the case of Buckstill East, prices have gone up to repair a roof. It's a big concern in the future.
I would be more than happy to have a conversation with Councillor Heap, and if he's still not satisfied, then we can bring that back to the next audit committee.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's part of your conversation you're going to have on more details.
Oh, it's going to be big.
And anything else you can think of before the meeting?
No, do you want dinner as well, Andrew? Is it? It's going to be a long one.
Okay. Oh, Tony.
Chairman, presumably some of these issues, if not all of them, will become part of an audit at some time. Otherwise...
Well, I should hope something. The meeting here, something will come out of it.
So these are all about control and fair exchange of fair money payments. So I don't want a rough assurance. I want a fairly specific assurance, if I could, that these last few issues will at some point become part of an audit. Yeah?
Right.
I'm conscious that Section 151 officer is in a difficult position, and I'm not trying to make that worse. I'm just trying to clarify that if there's issues out there, we have an audit section.
Thank you.
Could I just leap in there?
Oh, again, come on then.
Thank you. They are things that I'm failing to understand, and they may be very obvious to everybody else, but I think it would not be right for the 151 officer to have to go through an open audit at this moment. He may be able to satisfy all my concerns, so it may not become part of the audit in the future.
Okay, thank you. Andrew.
So I think there's a few points in there, really. I mean, as the council's Section 151 officer, there are the legislative framework that I have to comply with, of course. I am criminally liable if I neglect my duties in that regard as well. So I do take it seriously, and I am working in the interests of the council to make sure that the council's interests are always, and the ratepayers, sorry, the council taxpayers' interests are always well protected. We have an internal audit function whose job is partly for me to direct, to make sure that they look at areas where I have concerns, so that they can provide assurance and report back to this committee. But also that they're there to watch me as well, to make sure that I am performing my duties properly as well, and our auditor will have a dotted line to the Chief Executive if she has any concerns, and to this committee as well. So, I mean, there is quite a detailed framework to make sure that we are watching each other's backs, to make sure that we're all performing properly. And the audit committee, as you've probably heard through your training earlier on, are there as kind of the last line of defence to make sure that the right questions are being asked all the time. So I think, it's important that members have the necessary reassurance that the Qualis framework is sound. There's a lot of money invested in there, and we need to make sure that members are satisfied that the right controls are in place to give value for money for the council taxpayer. So there are a series of audits that have been undertaken and will continue to be undertaken to provide that assurance to the members of this committee. So we did a governance audit last year around Qualis's governance framework, and that reported back and was found no serious issues of concern. Currently undertaking an audit around the housing repairs and maintenance function that Qualis is providing to the council. And there are more pieces of work that will also be undertaken as well to make sure, that give the members that assurance. And I think that assurance is really important in the member space. I think, Qualis is integral to the medium-term financial plans of the council, but it doesn't need to be taking risks that the council can't or doesn't understand or can't manage. And that's where the Qualis needs the members' confidence, really. And internal audit is part of that assurance or reassurance process. So I think it's all valid, and we will see pieces of work that aim to give members that assurance. Some taken or undertaken already, and some to come. I hope that helps.
I think that answers your question, Tony, as well. Yeah? Okay. Anybody else before we move on? Well, okay. Right. Any other business? I don't think there is.
Excuse me, Chair. You need to approve my internal audit plan
Oh,
and
right,
the changing of opinions.
Right, your internal audit strategy and plan for 2020-23 approved, everybody? And approval of the change of individual report options for reports issued as part of the 2023 plan and onwards. All approved. Okay. Right, the next, any other business? I said I don't think there is any. The next item, exclusion of public and press, which I think we are now going through. I don't know if I have to say anything else other than turn off the webcasting. So goodbye, everybody who's watching on webcast.